The air in the boardroom felt too still, like even the windows knew something was about to shift. Then Thomas looked at me without really looking and said, "You're a great early builder, Lisa, but not everyone scales." Just like that. Calm. Final. No room for questions. Like he was handing out a weather forecast, not cutting the ground out from under my feet. It was our Q2 leadership huddle, held in the 10th floor glass boardroom, the one with skyline views, ergonomic chairs, and silence that echoed louder than applause. I'd sat through nearly 60 of these meetings in 15 years. But this one hollowed me out. The words landed just after the projector clicked off, just after the final slide lit up. Operational excellence, year 1 of rollout. It was my framework, my formulas, the back-end system I'd spent years refining between deadlines and dinners at my desk, now rebranded as Ops Sync and labeled under Team Task Force. No credit line, no acknowledgement, no Lisa Rowe. And then, in that same smooth tone, Thomas added, "As of Monday, Lisa's role transitions to a part-time oversight advisory position. Reduced scope, reduced pay. About 35% less if we're doing math." There was a pause, but not the kind that meant resistance, just the kind where people straighten their backs and hide their eyes, where silence means we don't want to be next. I didn't speak, not because I was afraid, but because if I opened my mouth, I might laugh. Instead, I turned to the last page of my notebook, and under the words "stay still until the reveal," I wrote one sentence: 11 months. Right on time. No one looked directly at me. Tasha scrolled on her tablet, Marcus bit into a mint, Angela picked at her cuticle like she just remembered she had hands. This is what 15 years distilled into. Not applause, not protest. Just a room full of people pretending they didn't see someone get shoved off a ledge. I stayed seated. My spine held me upright like it had every day since 2009, when this company was 5 people and a dream that barely covered rent. Back when Thomas still asked my opinion. Now he couldn't even look me in the eye when he gutted my salary. I placed my pen down slowly, quietly. Tucked my notebook into the side pocket of my leather tote. The same bag they gave me for my 10-year anniversary. It had my initials engraved in gold. Next to it, zipped behind a separate sleeve, was a slim USB, unlabeled, plain. The kind you wouldn't notice if it fell to the floor. Thomas moved on. Budget forecasts, summer intern schedules, restructuring of vendor flow, everything that sounded like progress when spoken with a clicker and a confident smile. I let them talk. Let them believe I'd sit quietly on the advisory bench. Let them think I was the type to burn out quietly and take the severance. But I'd filed the provisional patent for OpSync Framework v1.0 11 months ago, under my name, with a timestamp and a paper trail signed by the lawyer who believed in what I built more than any of these people ever did. I breathed in, felt the air sharpen in my chest, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the edge of something not breaking, but beginning. Some mornings I still wake up at 6:15. Not because I have to, not anymore. The alarm clock's long gone. It's muscle memory. 15 years of rising before the sun, pouring coffee into the same chipped mug, checking emails before my eyes even adjusted to the light. Old habits linger like dust in sunlight. But now, instead of answering someone else's fire drill message or reworking another last-minute deck, I walk barefoot into my tiny garden. I clip rosemary. I talk to my dahlias. I whisper to the birds like they're colleagues I actually like. And I sit at a wooden table with a second-hand laptop, building things that are finally mine. You see, I didn't go back. They offered me a contract, with bonuses, a fresh start, they called it. But I'd already started over. Quietly, carefully. For 11 months, I'd been building something they never saw coming. A consultancy, a brand, a client base I no longer had to beg for. I didn't need their salary. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their room to breathe. One morning not long ago, I got a package in the mail. An envelope, plain, unassuming. Inside was a small thank you card and a photo. A picture of a young woman in a navy blazer standing in front of her new office door. My old office door. It was Ella, the intern I once stayed late helping prepare for a presentation, the one my old boss had said wasn't polished enough to present. She'd seen what happened to me, and apparently she'd taken notes. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, she wrote, "You walk through fire with grace." So I knew I could, too. I didn't cry right away. I just sat there for a long time, tracing the photo's edge, thinking, maybe that was the point all along. Not the title, not the office, not the salary, but the quiet kind of power, the one that teaches people how to rise. Last week, I was asked to speak at a local business panel. I almost said no, not out of bitterness, just disbelief that someone actually wanted to hear me speak, not just for what I could build behind the scenes, but for who I had become after everything. Still, I said yes, quietly. And that night, I stood in a modest auditorium under warm lights, facing a room of mostly strangers, and one familiar face in the back, my old assistant, now a senior strategist at another firm. I spoke about growth, about silence, about how sometimes the most powerful moves you make are the ones nobody claps for in the moment. Afterward, someone from the audience, a woman maybe in her late 50s, came up to me. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Do you ever regret not speaking up sooner?" I took a breath, thought about all the years I bit my tongue, bent backwards, built others up while shrinking myself down. And I said no, because I wasn't silent. I was watching, I was learning. And when I finally spoke, it was with purpose. She nodded slowly. Her shoulders dropped, like someone had just taken a weight off her chest. It reminded me, we don't always get the applause. But sometimes we get something better. Impact. That's the thing they never understood. Power isn't always loud. It doesn't always walk in wearing a tailored suit or shouting through a mic. Sometimes it's a quiet woman sitting in the back taking notes, remembering every name, every slight, every seed of doubt, and choosing to become something none of them saw coming. To anyone listening who's ever been underestimated, overlooked, told to stay quiet, or be grateful for scraps, this story is for you. You don't need to explain your worth, you just need to know it. You're still here. That matters more than you think. And if you've been through something like this, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. If you know someone who needs to hear this today, send it their way. And if you want to stay a while, hit subscribe. We tell stories for those who've been quiet far too long. They didn't look at me right away. After everything I'd exposed in that boardroom, after the files, the emails, the voice clip of Linda's "cut her out quietly" remark echoed across the speakerphone, it was like the air had been sucked from the room. Silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then came the whispers. I caught snippets. Words like legal, liability, this is bad. Eyes darted between me, Linda, and the executives frozen in their leather chairs. Some of them, the ones who had clapped for her promotion just minutes earlier, were now carefully adjusting their ties and avoiding her gaze like she carried plague. Linda, God, she tried to regain footing. She laughed, said it was all a misunderstanding, that those files were outdated. But her voice cracked. She pointed at me. You think you know how this place runs? You wouldn't survive 1 quarter without me. And I just stared at her, calm, collected, silent. It was the VP of HR who moved first. He stood up so slowly it felt symbolic. We'll need to pause here, he said, voice tight. Linda, I'll need you to come with me. She didn't, not at first. Instead, she looked at everyone else, looked for allies. Even Brian, her lapdog for years, didn't move a muscle. He just kept staring at the table. Then the CEO spoke. Linda, he said, not harshly, just tired. Let's step out now. Her heels clicked as she walked out, not with dignity. Not like she wanted. It was stiff, hollow, her head high, but her spine trembling. And when the door shut behind her, a quiet exhale rippled through the room, like the tension had finally let go. The meeting didn't resume that day. No one really expected it to. Instead, people filtered out in pairs, whispers following them like shadows. Some glanced at me, not quite making eye contact, maybe embarrassed they hadn't said anything sooner, maybe just shaken that someone had. By the time I stepped into the hallway, my legs finally trembling from holding it all in, I heard a voice behind me. Wait. It was Brian. Of all people. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my eyes. For what it's worth, I didn't know it had gotten that bad. I should have asked. I didn't say anything. I just nodded once and walked away. The aftermath was quiet, but surgical. 3 days later, an internal email went out from HR. Linda Wexler has decided to pursue other opportunities. I almost laughed. Decided? She'd been escorted out by security. Even her nameplate was gone by the end of the week. Her projects were frozen, an audit launched, clients started asking questions. Not all of them polite. I didn't celebrate. I just kept showing up, steady and silent, like I always had. Then one afternoon, the CEO asked to see me. He wasn't someone who smiled much. But that day, there was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. I reviewed everything, he said. I should have seen it sooner. I'm sorry. And then he slid a folder across the desk. Interim Director of Strategy, he said. We want you to take the reins for now. No rush on the decision, but the board supports it, if you do. I sat there for a second, holding the folder, not quite believing it. I remembered the girl I'd been 15 years ago, nervous, determined, willing to stay late and smile through it all. I remembered who I became when they cut my pay overnight and didn't even have the decency to tell me in person. I remembered how they laughed, and now I looked him in the eye. I'll take it, I said. But only if I get to rebuild it the right way. He nodded. That's why we're asking you. Later that week, I passed by Linda's old office. It was empty. There. Just sunlight casting patterns on the carpet where her desk used to be. I paused for a moment, not to gloat, just to breathe. Then I turned, walked back down the hall, and stepped into my new office. This time, the name on the door was mine. It was supposed to be a celebration. A quarterly town hall, held in the gleaming new auditorium that Thomas loved to call the heart of our culture. Rows of ergonomic seats, soft spotlighting, catering from some downtown fusion place. And the stage, massive, minimalist, flanked by giant LED panels looping cheerful slides like Momentum Through Unity and powered by people. Thomas stood at center stage, of course. Charcoal suit, crisp collar, that polished, ever-reassuring voice of his washing over the crowd like a guided meditation. And today, he said, letting his words linger, we honor the architects of our next chapter, those who dared to scale what others only imagined. The applause swelled, predictable, practiced, and then the first slide shifted. Operational Leadership Team, FY Rollout. My name was nowhere, but two others were. Jacob, the guy who once asked me what a P&L was, and Megan, who'd joined 3 quarters ago and once forwarded me my own template thinking she'd discovered a fix. The title underneath their names? Foundational Architects, OpSync Initiative. My body didn't move, but inside something stood up. Thomas kept talking, kept smiling, kept using words that were once mine, phrases I coined, timelines I'd built, metrics I had obsessed over in my dimly lit office while everyone else went home. And then, like he'd rehearsed it, he said, "Oh, and before we move on, Jacob, Megan, why don't you come up and share the journey behind this incredible success?" Megan's heels clicked toward the stage. Jacob adjusted his tie. The room clapped again. A few people even stood, but one person didn't move. Nina. She was in the second row, just a junior data analyst with no real power. But her eyes locked onto mine and didn't look away. She knew. I could feel it. And just then, as Thomas turned to beam at the stage like a proud father, Nina quietly stood. She wasn't holding a mic. She didn't shout, but her voice, clear, steady, cut through the room like glass. "I think there's something you all should see first." The room paused. Jacob froze mid-step. Megan's smile twitched. Thomas blinked. "I'm sorry?" Nina didn't waver. She held up her phone, turned to the AV tech in the back, and simply said, "Play the recording I sent you, the one from July 11th. File name OPS Origin." There was a flicker on the screen. Static. Then, me. Sitting in that same conference room 11 months ago, explaining the OpSync framework, to Thomas, to Jacob, to Megan, slide after slide of my voice, my work, my name on the decks. And at the very end, Thomas saying, "Let's shelve this for now, Lisa. It's not quite scalable yet." Then the screen went dark. No one clapped. No one moved. Except me. I stood, walked slowly down the side aisle, the heels of my shoes the only sound in the room. When I reached the stage, I didn't look at Thomas, or Jacob, or Megan. I looked at the room, at Nina, at the ones who had looked away for too long. Then I took a breath and pulled a slim white envelope from my blazer. It simply read, "For legal review, OpSync," and when I placed it on the podium, I said nothing. But the silence, it said everything. The silence lingered, heavy, dense, electric. Thomas opened his mouth, but no words came out. Megan looked down at her shoes. Jacob backed a half step toward the side of the stage, as if the edge might let him disappear. And then the whispers began. From the back rows first, then the side aisles. Then someone near the front leaned to whisper something to the person beside them, and that person, wide-eyed, shook their head slowly. I didn't need applause. I just stood there, still, quiet. A woman who had been erased and had returned with evidence carved in stone. Lisa, Thomas finally said, forcing a chuckle, I think this is all just a misunderstanding. Why don't we step outside and talk this through? I turned to him, just slightly, just enough to let him see that my eyes were steady now. No tears, no panic, just something cold, something earned. I think we're past that. His jaw clenched, a rustle behind him. It was Davis, from legal. I hadn't seen him at first, sitting quietly near the back. But now he was on his feet, moving toward the stage, his face pale. I'll take that envelope, Davis said, voice low but firm. I gave it to him. Not because he asked nicely, but because that moment was never about confrontation. It was about confirmation. That I wasn't just imagining the betrayal, that what they did had weight, that they didn't get to walk away clean. Thomas tried again. Lisa, I've always valued your contributions. We thought you were stepping back, focusing on transition support. That's what you said, remember? I smiled. That's what you heard. He blinked, but I never said it. Gasps, subtle but audible. From somewhere in the middle rows, someone, a senior account manager maybe, stood and said, I remember that meeting. She never said she was stepping back. You told her Ops Sync was being tabled. And then someone else stood, then another. It was slow, it was quiet, but one by one they rose, until a third of the room was standing. Not clapping, not shouting, just standing. And Thomas? He looked small now, like a man caught beneath the weight of a lie that had finally grown teeth. Jacob tried to speak. Megan stepped forward like she might cry, but no one was looking at them anymore. All eyes had shifted. To me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just leaned into the mic and said, I spent 15 years building what you tried to steal in 11 months. I let it go, until I couldn't anymore. Then I stepped back. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't waiting for approval. I was watching the collapse. Thomas turned to Davis. She signed an NDA. She's bluffing. Davis didn't even blink. We'll need to revisit that. Her name's on the original white paper. Boom. Megan's mouth dropped open. Jacob cursed under his breath. But I was already walking down the steps. Already done. Already free. Behind me, the screen flickered one last time. This time displaying the Ops Sync development log. The metadata showed original creation by Lisa McConnell scored dev. Timestamp, 11 months ago. And when I reached the exit, I didn't turn around, because I knew they weren't watching the door, they were watching the truth. And it had my name all over it. The first time I truly realized I had been erased was at the quarterly town hall. The projector dimmed, the slides rolled on, one by one, filled with numbers I had spent entire weekends building, charts I had stayed up past midnight polishing, systems I had designed when our budgets were bleeding. And yet, every title, every mention said team-led innovation. Not my name. Not once. I remember sitting in the back, next to the catering table. I wasn't even on the invite list this time. Matt, the junior analyst I'd mentored for 2 years, had texted me a photo of the agenda with a "thought you'd want to know." I thought I'd be angry. But what I felt was quieter, heavier. Like being airbrushed out of a photo you helped take. The final speaker that day was Thomas. He stood tall, tailored, assured, as if none of us in the room remembered he'd once panicked over missing payroll and come to me for advice. As if he hadn't once said to me, Lisa, if this company ever turns around, it'll be because of your spine, not mine. But that day, he spoke like a man giving himself a crown. And our Ops Sync system is now being used across all departments, he said. Big credit to the team that helped build it. Especially Nathan for leading the charge. Nathan was on a ski trip the week we launched the pilot model. I watched a few heads in the room turn toward me. Just briefly. A flicker of discomfort in their eyes, like watching someone get slapped in slow motion and not knowing if they should step in. But no one said a word, not even me. Because by then, I had already stopped speaking. Not out of fear, but out of calculation. 11 months earlier, the day after they slashed my salary, I'd started copying everything to an external drive I kept in my locker. Every model, every draft, every memo that bore my initials before they scrubbed them. I had also started something else. Freelancing. One project a week. Quiet, remote, all through referrals. I signed NDAs, built operational systems for small nonprofits, and gave startups blueprints for scaling, blueprints better than anything I ever gave Thomas, and I was building a different kind of client list. One that didn't just see me as an early builder, but as the whole damn architect. Still, it didn't mean it didn't hurt. One Friday, I found a printed agenda on the break room counter. It was for a private strategy retreat in Tahoe, the kind we used to plan together, me and Thomas and the old core team. My name wasn't on the list, but Nathan's was, and so was Allison's, the new operations director they had poached 2 months ago, a role that looked suspiciously like mine, only with a bigger office and 35% more pay. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at my ceiling until sunrise. And then I got up, made a cup of black coffee, and emailed my lawyer. Subject line, employment records request. No anger, no threats, just movement. I wasn't always the one they overlooked. In fact, when I first joined the company 15 years ago, Thomas used to say I was his lighthouse in a storm. That was back when our entire office could fit into one rented space above a coffee shop. I still remember how the walls smelled like burnt espresso, and how we'd scribble sales ideas on the backs of napkins. I came in when the books were a mess, the product was glitchy, and half the team didn't even know how to invoice. But I had grit. I rolled up my sleeves and stayed late to clean up the systems, train the new hires, stabilize the financials. Back then, no one needed titles, just trust. And Thomas trusted me. By year 3, I was the one fixing operational workflows while he flew cross-country charming investors. By year 5, I was overseeing client retention, onboarding, HR compliance, and vendor negotiations, wearing so many hats I forgot which one was mine. Still, I didn't mind. I believed in the mission. And I believed in him. That trust lasted a long time. Until he started hiring people who looked great on LinkedIn, but never lasted past lunch without asking how to sort a pivot table. It started subtle. The first time my name was left off a monthly newsletter summary, I thought it was a typo. I even messaged the intern in charge and offered help for the next one. But then it happened again, and again. And suddenly, I wasn't being looped into quarterly meetings, not even CC'd. Just left out, quietly. I laughed it off at first, called it growing pains. But that laugh faded the week my project was renamed OpSync and suddenly introduced in an all-hands call, without my name on a single slide. Then came the questions, polite but sharp. Hey Lisa, could you give this presentation to David instead? You're so great at prepping materials. Would you mind just sitting in for notes on this one? Jenna will handle the pitch. It stung, but I said yes. I always said yes. Because after all those years, I'd made the mistake of believing my loyalty would protect me. That my work ethic, my spreadsheets, my templates, my late-night fire drills would shield me from becoming obsolete. But they didn't want someone who had history. They wanted someone they could reshape. And I was not that. Still, I stayed. I watched. I kept the files, the receipts, the version history. I saved drafts. I listened more than I spoke. Because somewhere deep down I knew they weren't just forgetting me. They were phasing me out. This shift became clearest when they hired Jenna. 24, MBA from somewhere shiny. Her resume read like a brochure, polished, strategic, scalable. Thomas introduced her at the holiday mixer with a glass of rosé in one hand and the other resting on her shoulder, like she was the future. She's going to help us bring a fresh perspective, he said, looking at me only briefly, then right past me like I was already behind him. The fresh perspective, as it turned out, meant rebranding everything I'd built. Jenna shadowed me for 3 weeks, asking thoughtful questions, scribbling notes, nodding like she really valued what I had to say. I gave her everything. My onboarding process, my client lifecycle flow, even my red flag list, vendors who always paid late, contractors who ghosted mid-project. I handed her 15 years of institutional memory because I thought, this is how you mentor. This is how you pass it on. I didn't realize I was handing her the blueprint to replace me. By the 4th week, I was removed from 2 accounts without warning. She was streamlining communication. The 5th week, she presented my systems to the executive team with a new name, a new slide deck, and a pastel palette that made everything look millennial approved. She didn't credit me. Not once. And Thomas? He clapped, said it was exactly the kind of initiative we need going into Q2. I remember going to the break room after and standing there with my coffee, staring at the microwave clock like it was a countdown to some invisible deadline I couldn't name yet. My fingers were cold, even though the mug was hot. I didn't feel anger. I felt erased. And yet, I kept coming in. I still had people in the company I cared about. People who whispered things like, "I saw your original deck. Hers was just copy-paste." Or, "I don't know what Thomas is doing, but it's not right." They whispered, but no one said anything out loud, not even when I wasn't invited to the new leadership offsite. Not even when my title quietly changed from Director of Operations to Senior Advisor Transitional. No announcement, just a new placard at my desk one morning. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just took a picture of it, added it to the folder on my desktop called Exit Step by Step. It wasn't a resignation plan. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something I hadn't allowed myself to think about in over a decade. Leaving. Not because they didn't need me, but because I no longer needed to be needed by people who only valued what I could build, not who I was. So I built something else, quietly, privately, and with the same relentless clarity I had given them for 15 years. Because when you've spent a career saving other people from collapse, you learn how to design a safety net that no one sees coming, until they're the ones falling.